we have the concept of moral injury now, and we apply that to trauma survivors, especially veterans, warriors who do things that are against their moral code, who do them or even witness them or participate them in any way. Well, that war and all of our immoral wars are moral injury to the entire nation, not just to the people who have to fight it.
My guest today is Dr. Ed Tick. Ed is a writer and a poet. He is a transformational healer, a holistic psychotherapist, an educator, and an international journey guide whose entire work has been devoted to helping soldiers who've been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury. Not all of Ed's clients come from past wars, and in fact, right now he's working with soldiers in both Russia and in Ukraine and helping them grapple with the war trauma that they are currently experiencing. It's work that Ed has been doing since the Viet Nam War. During our war in Iraq, the Pentagon reached out to him, and Ed is not he's a civilian and not a military man, but they asked him to train thousands of U.S. military chaplains of every faith on how to help soldiers struggling with PTSD. And he also needed to help the chaplains themselves. Ed believes that PTSD and moral injury are wounds to the soul that must be healed holistically before symptoms will finally dissolve and the person can actually heal. Ed's story of changing the world is so deep and so far-reaching, it is impossible to capture in just one sitting. So I hope you'll check out his books and his poetry, and actually also consider one of his healing journeys to Greece or to Vietnam or elsewhere. You can find information on his website at edtick.org. That's T-I-C-K, edtick.org. If you're enjoying the content on this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you would please press the subscribe button so you'll be notified whenever a new episode drops. So now please enjoy the very healing presence of Dr. Edward Tick. Hello, Edward Tick. Welcome to How We Change the World podcast.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm honored to be with you today.
The honor is literally all mine, but thank you. I'm so looking forward to this as we were chatting before you came on or before we started recording. I'm so interested in so many dimensions of your work, and I know that listeners and viewers will be as well, because you really speak to the heart and soul of every human being, and who cannot appreciate that, right? That's your work. Yeah.
It is, and even with that comment, thank you very much for that. And I think it's important that we all recognize that people who have been tragically cut off from their own hearts and souls really do not necessarily understand and respond to our work easily, because those parts of their humanity have been sadly shut down. And so it's, yes, people respond from their heart and soul, and also we are dealing with universal wounds that shut down our humanity and need to be reawakened.
Reawaken. Well, the way that you do that is that you have, for over 4 decades, maybe a little, I don't know how many years exactly, you've been a transformational healer, I think is a good title, right?
Yes.
A holistic psychotherapist.
Yes.
And you're also an author, which we're going to talk about your books. As I told you, I completely felt transformed reading, especially your newest book, which we'll get into. But you're a poet, which I think is where you started. And you bring that into your work so deeply. But also the fact that you're such a lifelong student of Greek history, mythology, other parts, teachings, I guess we could say. And you're also a journey guide, which we're going to also speak about, helping veterans heal from war, which is really the nut of it, right? The core of your work is helping veterans heal, starting with Vietnam. Can you just start talking about that a little bit? Is that the first work that you did as a psychotherapist, is with veterans?
I would say the first significant work where I was specializing in a particular area of concern. Briefly, try to keep it brief.
That's
For
okay.
our
We have
purposes, we
time.
have so much to share. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I turned 18 in 1969, the height of the Vietnam War.
Mm.
I was in college. I had a student deferment for the first year. I was
Okay.
protesting the war. I began protesting the war in high school when I was about 15 because I judged it to be so immoral, misdirected, genocidal, that I wasn't against the warriors. I was against the war and the government's decisions. So then I had to face whether or not I was going to serve. First year of college, I had a student deferment, and I was already working on my conscientious objector plea to try to give alternative service rather than go to Vietnam.
Okay. Wow.
The student deferments ended and a lottery system started that young people don't even know about this history, but we do. And I drew a high lottery number, and suddenly I didn't have to do anything.
Oh.
We have the concept of moral injury now, and we apply that to trauma survivors, especially veterans, warriors who do things that are against their moral code, who do them or even witness them or participate them in any way. Well, that war and all of our immoral wars are moral injury to the entire nation, not just to the people who have to fight it. And I actually felt morally injured getting a high lottery number. Suddenly, somebody sticks their hand in a bin and pulls out a number, and I'm off the hook. I don't have to serve. I don't have to do anything. So lots of people quit college immediately. People who got low numbers said, forget it, I'm going to Vietnam. I was here to avoid Vietnam. Some people went to Canada. Some people enlisted to try to get a better assignment. And a lot of people quit college because they got high numbers. I didn't want to be here. I just was avoiding the draft.
Right.
So I watched the entire war splinter our entire generation, not just who went, but what everybody did and the choice everybody made. Okay. I kept protesting the war. I finished my master's degree in 1975, the year the war ended, and I moved to a central part of rural New York State. I was invited into a medical practice, so I was a young psychotherapist, and this was 1975, just as the war ended. And in addition to other folks with, many different problems for psychotherapy, Vietnam vets started to come into my practice. And I went, first of all, many reactions. I don't know what to do, but we have no diagnosis and there's no literature on this at all. I've studied it through the humanities, through the Greek tradition. I read the Iliad when I was 10 years old. So I've been studying the world warrior tradition in many sources. I was also initiated in Native American traditional healing. That's another part of my legacy.
But wait, before you continue, so you only had a master's degree at that level, right? You hadn't gotten your PhD yet.
That's correct.
So you had no, but I just want to ask you a specific question because you said you had no, or you said we had no way to diagnose and treat what they were coming in from. But this is something that was different with Vietnam that had not happened with, say, the Korean War, World War I, World War II, because certainly they had damage from the war.
Of course, they had damage from the war. There was the diagnosis that we now have called post-traumatic stress disorder was actually created by the American Psychiatric Association in 1980, 5 years after the end of the Vietnam War. And there were 3 populations that said, we're not well, we're suffering, and look at us, we're all suffering in the same way. Mental health world, will you please pay attention to us? It was the Vietnam veterans and women, bless the feminist movement that was strong and active, and women survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence were saying, look at us, we've got the same kinds of symptoms. And the third population was Holocaust survivors and their children. So there was no, previous to 1980,
no name for it? No diagnosis for it?
No, there was not. Combat neurosis. World War II was battle fatigue, and World War I was shell shock. But those were supposedly limited to the wartime and just give
Right.
people 3 square meals a day and get them off the front lines and let them rest and it will go away. And in World War I and World War II, that was the practice. And they were sent back to the front as soon as they were
Yeah.
restabilized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But the Vietnam vets were coming with a different type of injury as well, right? The unclear mission, the unclear knowing whether they were on the right side or the wrong side, those types of whether we should be there or not.
yes. So there was
Did
more,
that
yeah, that's right. So there was moral injury. There was moral ambiguity. During World War II, General Eisenhower, as commander-in-chief, saw that American troops were becoming disillusioned. What are we doing here fighting a European war? Many of them said. What's our purpose? So at that point, Eisenhower ordered all American troops within 50 miles of any liberated concentration camp had to change their trajectory and walk by the camps and see the camps so it would renew their moral purpose for fighting the war.
Wow.
I just want to go home and out of this European war. Eisenhower said, no, we really are fighting a universal evil. And we all have to do this together as, in a free world and on the right side. So the loss of mission and purpose can be severe in any wartime. And as wars grind on, people are used up. Their souls are depleted. We can also I do call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic soul distress. Soul distress. It's all of our entire being. As you rightly said, I have a holistic orientation. Stress disorder indicates what now psychology and psychiatry call the broken brain, and that the PTSD is all in our brain functioning and our damaged central nervous system. That's part of it. But that's not the whole thing. It really is everything: the body, the mind, the heart, the soul, the community, our sense of belonging and purpose. All of those are afflicted in this traumatic wound, and all of them have to be addressed. And the ancient traditions do address those. Modern medicine and psychiatry and psychology barely touch them.
It seems like as you describe all the parts of us that are of one that is injured during an event like that, whether it's war or an attack, as you mentioned, might be sexual abuse, might be a lot of different things that create those same types of, maybe to a milder degree. It's something I'd like to ask you about in a minute. But as you describe all the parts of a person that are injured and that need healing, it seems so a priori. It seems like of course that's true. Of course it's a community. Of course it's our heart, our soul, our body, our psyche, our everything. And yet it's so rare to find someone like you that uses that entire holistic approach to healing, and whether even it's medical or psychological. It seems so obvious. How are we ignoring what is so clear to even someone who hasn't studied it, like myself?
Because my global answer is that we've been in a trance for 2,000 years and have lost our holistic orientation.
How to talk about that?
Well, referring to the Greek tradition, Hippocrates, who is known as the father of modern medicine or the father of scientific medicine. So 2,400 years ago, Hippocrates said, all illnesses begin in the soul and end in the body. I believe that. I take that approach. Carl Jung in depth psychology also takes that approach. But most of the psychological schools do not. And people don't even use the word soul anymore. Or they use it very casually. Sure, I do body-soul healing. What does that mean? Well, I'm a massage therapist. I'm a yoga practitioner. Those are all good. It's not the same as really understanding and guiding the soul in all of its dimensions, dynamics. It's allowing the system they're using to carry the spirituality when we really need to be in active spiritual searching and experience ourselves. Now, after Hippocrates, when Aristotle came along, we are in an Aristotelian world. Aristotle was a genius in dividing the world up into all of its endless components. These are the species, and these are the genuses, and this is how this animal behaves, and this is how the mind works, and this is how the body works. He was a genius in dividing the world up into the components so we can control it. And he broke the holism that had been developing in the Greek tradition, where even until Aristotle's time and Hippocrates' time, medicine was a branch of philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, everything was about the soul and the way, what we call the gods and the goddesses were very, very close to humans then. The intimacy between the mortal and the transpersonal or the divine was about as intimate as it's ever gotten in human history. But since that time of the Greek Enlightenment, we have been losing that and becoming more individualistic, more pragmatic, more materialistic, more, no offense, science is really important and we need it, but we've been sacrificing spirituality for the sake of science. So instead of a unified effort where science and spirit guide us together, we've lost spirituality. Most healers don't really work with it, and we rely on science. And psychology has been trying to prove to the world since the 1800s anyway, that it's really a science, and it should be counted that way. And so psychological research has become more and more scientific and empirical, and less humanistic and accessible and approachable.
I would think that if
we're in this cultural condition that's actually worldwide now.
Well, and I'm wondering why the pursuant of that, why that continues on when it I don't know if we used to heal people more readily, more holistically, and more completely back to 2,400 years ago. And also, was that for everyone, or was that just for the more elite that were studying Greek mythology and studying the gods? Like, was everyone closer to the gods in those days? Was it intimate through a more intimate relationship throughout the entire population? Would you say?
Yes,
okay.
I would say so, and I can present some evidence for it. So the healing tradition, the ancient Greek healing tradition under the god of healing Asclepius, is the origin of medicine and psychology in the Western world. And it goes back more than 22. We have records going back to about 13 or 1400 BCE.
Okay.
So it's much older than the classical era of Greece. It's 1,000 years before that.
Interesting.
And briefly, medicine evolved out of sacred practices, and it originated in earth medicine and in shamanism 25,000 years ago, and it was continuous. It was for everybody. It was for women as well as men. It was for slaves as well as nobles. The medicine of the ancient Greek world was available for everybody, even though all of the freedoms and social rights were not accessible to everybody. But they did have a perfect holistic healthcare system in several ways. So, all right. So Asclepius was the god of healing. Healing evolved from shamanic work in the mountains over a millennium to move into the cities and develop beautiful temples and sanctuaries and holistic healing centers that were all over the Mediterranean world.
Oh, they were. Okay.
From Egypt all the way to Iberia to Spain and Portugal, and from in the north, from the Caucasus Mountains and the Black Sea area, all the way through Greece and Italy to northern Africa.
That's fascinating.
People from all over traveled to them. We know of more than 320 of such sanctuaries that existed all over the world, all over that part of the world. And this tradition lasted for, 2,000 years, until about 500 AD, when the early Christian tradition co-opted some of it to use it under the Christian Godhead, and destroyed some of it because it was pagan.
I hate to, I don't want, I want to ask you a question before you go on, but I also don't want you to lose your train of thought.
Yeah, go.
All right. Okay, I'm just curious that it's so, you say that's when the humanity was closest to divinity, and all these centers of healing existed, holistic healing existed, hundreds of them, these sanctuaries that they were using in that way, and those were successful.
Yes.
Then here comes not just Christianity, but the ancient Hebrews and the time of saying, now we've got one God. There will be no other gods before me. Did that destroy that entire? It seems to me like that's like the event, because you're saying 2,000 years ago, roughly 2,500 years ago, that it started to collapse. Yes. Was it because now we can't talk about Zeus and all the others? We can't talk about that anymore because there's only one God, and otherwise you're.
Oh yes, yeah, yes. The contrast between polytheism and monotheism, they really collided, and monotheism really went to war against paganism and polytheism for sure. The Greek tradition, because it was polytheistic, it was really open to any form of worship and expression of the divine. So when Paul arrived in Athens to preach the gospel of Jesus, and that was true, the Athenians said, "Oh, you have another God? That's great. Bring him to us and teach us about another God, because we worship we know our deities and we know other deities and we worship them." And they even had temples in Athens, on the island of Delos, and other places where they had temples for other gods that were imported from other traditions. So they welcomed the teachings of Hebraism and early Christianity until, and then of course, early Christianity turned against polytheism and started to destroy the temples, crush the worship of any of the other gods, and set up God the Father and Jesus the Son as the only ones to worship. At the same time, Greek philosophy was moving from polytheism to, well, from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle. Aristotle proposed behind all the gods is the unmoved mover, the one in the center of the universe that breaks up into all these dualities. So even Greek philosophy was moving toward a monotheistic interpretation of the cosmos. And so that
interesting.
Early Christianity coming together contributed to the crushing of all the gods. And it did alienate the people from their original sources of intimacy with the gods and goddesses. There are many other ways. I was talking about Asclepius and the god of healing and the healing sanctuary, but let's mention there were other ways of being intimate and communicating with the divine. People went to Delphi for the famous oracle there, and that was Apollo, the god of truth, telling people some riddle, like we draw the runes or consult tarot. Well, imagine traveling days or weeks to the God's sanctuary to get the one oracle that's going to guide your life, and it's directly from the God of truth. So oracle seeking was also a major way of being intimate with the divine and setting ourselves on a course to fulfill the divine's purpose with us and with our lives. There were, we know, again, more than 320 holistic healing sanctuaries. There were more than 200 oracular sanctuaries all over the Mediterranean world, like Delphi. Delphi was the most famous and important, but they were all over, and people used them all the time. And there were, we could talk about this for hours, there were other mystery traditions specifically designed to put people in a deep connection with the divine, with the numinous, to have breakthrough experiences such that I know I have a soul, I know my soul is eternal, I know the body will die, but the soul won't, and so I can live my life as a soul. I know there are transpersonal powers They are concerned with us, and we can communicate with them, even though they will throw me away or throw my mortal coil away. But we are intimate, and we have purposes. We have a destiny to fulfill that is doing the work of the divine down here. So the ancient Greek world had numerous ways for accessing this belonging to the universe, this wisdom, helping reveal to us what our purposes are, and healing us from, in a holistic way, from whatever wounds and traumas and struggles we have, so that we are on a good healing path for ourselves and giving service to others.
I'm going to, just so we don't lose people who are really curious about how are you using this today, and how have you taken, because I could talk about that forever and listen to that forever, but also you've taken this knowledge and you've gone to Greece, I think you've learned Greek, right? Didn't you also learn to speak?
Yes.
There are some languages I can't say a word in, and that's one of them.
I've learned Greek at about an intermediate level, and it's wonderful. And for all of our friends out there, it's not only Greek, but when we learn other languages, because a language expresses the concepts, the core concepts of the culture it comes from. So really, when I'm learning another language, Greek especially,
learning the culture,
some others, our minds crack open. When we learn their words and concepts, we're learning to see the world in a broader, more expansive way that culture knows and ours doesn't. So it's extraordinary to have our, really, literally, our minds,
anything we can do to break our minds open. Really, so, but you've incorporated your knowledge, and you've gone there. You've really embodied this in your work. Yes. I don't know if you want to return to when you were, getting your master's, because that's when I broke into your story, and maybe how you pulled so many of these. I don't want to call modalities, that dimensions, I guess, into your healing. Before we go on, I want to say the name of your book in case anyone wants to look at it, or read it. It's called Soul Medicine. I have to read, even in my own book, if I have to look at the subtitle because I can never remember. Soul Medicine, Healing Through Dreams, Incubations, Visions, Oracles, and Pilgrimages. So you use all of these in your work. So let's return to how that happened and how you use it with vets and with others, I think. Wherever you want to pick up your journey.
All right. I'll briefly go to my journey, and then I want to share with our friends who are listening how we do this work and how they might in their own lives.
Right. That'd be great.
In the various ways. Picking up my journey. Okay. So we were in...
If it's relevant to your story.
I'm going to connect my working with veterans and trying to figure out how to do that with my work in Greece, because they're directly connected.
Yeah.
All right. So first, as I shared, I read the Iliad when I was 10 years old, and I fell in love with the Greek tradition. So I've been studying it my whole life. So I had a foundation in that. I began working with the veterans at the very end of the Viet Nam War in 75, 76, 77 for about 8 or 10 years. I did the best talk psychotherapy I possibly could. I studied everything. I really got to know the veterans intimately. I was healing my own moral injury because I had thought that if I had to serve in Vietnam, the only way I could go would be to be as a medic. And my godfather, my mother's only sibling, was a very traumatized medic at the Battle of the Bulge. So I also absorbed that as a child. And he was my godfather. He's in me. So I said, when the vets started to come into my young therapy practice, now I get to be, I would have been a medic in Vietnam. Life saved me from that. I can work now to be the best medic I can possibly be.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So
that was a gift that you didn't realize that.
I've been wearing that identity forever, and I can see the spirit of my uncle, my godfather, finally at peace and smiling. on the other side as he never was when he was here. Okay.
Wow.
So for 8 to 10 years, I was doing the best psychotherapy work I knew how to do. I decided to do a solo pilgrimage to Greece in 1987 to study their citizen warrior tradition and learn how in ancient times they healed war trauma. Because war trauma is universal. And we know of more than 80 names that what we call PTSD has been given through the ages. The word trauma itself is Greek. It means
one would think that maybe war is not a good idea, but, you know, we digress.
Well, he hasn't learned that one. No. But it's in the Bible. It's in Greek mythology. It's in the spiritual traditions of the whole world. The Native Americans knew this wound. The Lakota, the Sioux people called it in their language, Nahi na Peapi, which means the spirits left him. They knew it was a spiritual wound.
Wow.
So by the time I had worked with veterans for 8-10 years, I knew it was a spiritual wound and we were not healing it spiritually. So I went to Greece to search for how did they. All right. Now we get to the Greek healing tradition. 1987, Epidavros, or Epidaros, it's spelled in English, it was the major healing sanctuary of ancient Greece. Okay, that was Asclepius, the healing god's home sanctuary, and that's where dream incubation was originally practiced and spread all over the Greek world. Epidaros has a huge ancient theater. Every summer they have an ancient theater festival. That year I went to opening night when they were performing The Trojan Women by Euripides, which is probably the most intense anti-war play ever written. And I sat in the front row and oh my God, did I absorb it and feel it. And I had achieved from that a catharsis of so much of the war toxin I had absorbed in my heart, and my soul, and my body for 10 years of working with the veterans. And and I changed because from that to that moment, I thought I was a psychotherapist for Viet Nam veterans. In the sanctuary with Euripides and the Trojan Women, I really awakened to no. War is universal. It's always the same condition. It is an archetype that always visits and haunts and destroys humanity. And its conditions are always the same. And the Vietnam War is just my generation's manifestation of the ancient war archetype that happens again and again and again. And so I'm not just a therapist for Vietnam veterans. My calling is to do everything I can to be a war healer of all wars from all times and all places whenever they cross my path. So
and maybe not just actual wars, right? Even other types of maybe personal wars that people have had to endure. Yeah, I just want to say that you wrote about that in your book, and it was really insightful. And I think that if people wanted to learn more about that play, Women of Troy, and how it changed your complete trajectory, really, that you write about that. Really, I was going to ask you, so I'm glad that you brought it up because I was curious how much it changed you. Because then what happened after you saw that? What did you?
Well,
how did you change?
Entirely. It really changed me. It changed my identity. I'm going to share now that it also changes the veterans' identities when they experience this. I have a long, wonderful story of a veteran healing, but right now I just want to tell the punchline. As this veteran, we were doing healing ritual for this veteran in Greece, and along the way through the ritual, he had made a speech telling his whole story. In a sacred site in Athens, at the end of that, at the end of him retelling his story and the healing he was going through, he said to our group and the Greek people who were gathered to listen, "From now on and forevermore, I am no longer a Vietnam veteran. From now on, I am a spiritual warrior whose service was in Vietnam."
Oh.
a spiritual warrior whose service was in Vietnam. Just like I transformed years before from I'm a therapist for Vietnam veterans to no, I'm not. I'm a war healer. He transformed from I'm a traumatized Vietnam veteran to no, I'm not. I'm a spiritual warrior who had a tragic service in Vietnam, but it made me a warrior, and I'm healing from it, and I embrace my warrior identity, and I can give service from now on and for the rest of my life, which he is doing.
That's a beautiful story, and that was. It sounds like from one of the. I don't want to call them trips. What do you call when you take a group of people to Greece or to Vietnam? What do you call
Pilgrimage.
that?
I call it
a pilgrimage. Yeah. So
And
this was
then-
on one of the pilgrimages that you took Vietnam vets to Greece for healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I have very many stories like that. Many of them are in my book. There's too many stories to fit into a book, so they're all also representative of many. But it works. It works. It works. It works. I've also studied. I'm thinking of my Native American elder. I did a 20-year apprenticeship under Native American shaman. Also to do this work and to learn their warrior healing ways through vision questions, lodges. And my teacher used to just laugh. Can I use a curse word?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're all grown-ups.
So this is a Native American elder who was guiding us on vision quests in the wilderness. And when we came back, stunned and amazed and transforming, he would just chuckle. And with his thick accent, he'd say, yup, this shit really works.
Oh. That does not sound like a Native.
It doesn't.
You do That's how he said it.
That's
he was making fun of the American.
Yeah.
Boy.
So it really works. It really works. And it is holistic, and it does include all aspects of our being. So how do I do it? Well, in Greece, we go to these Scapian sanctuaries. In those sanctuaries, originally, they were the perfect holistic healing sanctuaries. We would envy them today. So they had nutrition and gymnastics and acupressure and massage and hydrotherapy and psychotherapy and dreamwork and theater and every form of holistic healing we could imagine. And that was not even the main healing. People were in the sanctuary receiving holistic practices for as long as they needed to get them stable and well, and wait for messages that they were called to appear before the God for their final healing. And in that tradition, the actual healing practice in Greek is called enkimesis. We translate it as dream incubation. So just like Carl Jung and the Jungian analysts work to help people achieve big dreams, the occasional dream that really connects us with the divine, heals, bring deep soul healing, or gives us our divine purpose. That's the core of analytics psychology and the Jungian tradition. Wonderful, great, it's good. This tradition was the origin of Jungian psychology as well, because in dream incubation, people went into temples and reserved only for going into deep incubation in order to have a dream or a vision sent by a god or the god's representative that brought you healing immediately, or the recipe for how to heal yourself. So people would, after being called into the inner chambers, they would be fasting and praying and just waiting and sleeping until a dream or a vision came to them. We have, I could pull the books off my shelves. I quote a lot of those dreams in my book, but we have well over 1,000 testimonies from ancient times that have been translated of the kinds of dream healing experiences that people had. So we do dream incubation when we're in Greece on pilgrimage. We go to some of the Asclepian sanctuaries. We study the traditions. I'm going back in a month. People are already keeping dream journals and watching their dreams and studying the tradition, some of the practices. But when we get to Greece, we will continue dream groups every day, but when we're there a week or 8 days and everybody's really immersed in the Greek tradition, we will create a sanctuary, and we will do an all-night dream incubation where people have been fasting and praying and bringing their health and healing needs before the divine and asking for dreams and visions that direct them in how to achieve healing. And some of those stories are in my book as well. And again, they're actual and also representative because I've been doing this, next month, I believe, it'll be the 23rd journey, a pilgrimage I'm leading to Greece.
To Greece.
To Greece, just to Greece. And I've also led 19 to Viet Nam, also using pilgrimage and the Vietnamese traditions. And also, we also go to ancient theaters and we do sacred theater work. We also go to Delphi or other oracle sites and we look for and pray for and receive oracles in amazing and sometimes miraculous ways. So all of those methodologies in the subtitle, Dream Incubation, Visions, and Oracles, were specific and developed ways with long legacies directly connected to the particular gods and goddesses and sacred sites that ancient Greece had. So we go to those sites, we study those stories and myths, and we also study them with the Greek people because it's a living tradition there now for them as well. And then we actually do, we replicate the practices in the sacred sites as we travel. And people come back utterly transformed.
And healed.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, is there such a thing as healing or healed, or is it always a process of healing? Because I would think you shared your own story of having an illness 5 years ago where you were able to employ some of this, which I found fascinating. Maybe we can talk about. So,
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, is it a final thing? Let's just talk about, for example, the vets first that are literally suffering PTSD from the war. Do they come back more whole? Do they ever feel that they're fully whole?
Well, thank you for that question and direction and even your words, because the words health and healing both derive from whole and wholeness. So when we are healing, we are becoming whole again. So we could talk about this for hours and hours as well, about can we ever become as fully whole as when we arrived as infants, when we didn't have wounds, we weren't broken, when our minds hadn't been programmed and broken off from the original unity. So I would say we're always healing and moving toward wholeness, and the great masters seem to achieve it. So we have Jesus and Buddha and Socrates and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, who have achieved an extraordinary integration and wholeness that guides us all. And yet they still had wounds. They still had wounds.
What about the symptomatic parts for someone who's suffering from soul wound, from PTSD? Can they, through this process that you take them on the pilgrimage, heal without medicine? I mean, to the point where their symptoms have at least released and they're growing and they're healing?
Yes, absolutely. A strong
That's the goal, I would think.
Yeah. All right. So that Vietnam veteran I mentioned who said, I'm no longer a Vietnam veteran. I'm a spiritual warrior. With PTSD, the experience and consciousness of trauma so dominates our psyche that we define ourselves by our wound. When we do our soul healing work, we are regrowing our souls to be bigger than the wound. So the man's name was John, and I have permission to share his story. So John's identity, when I am just a Vietnam veteran, I've got PTSD, I'm disabled, my country doesn't love me, it betrayed me, and I'm stuck in my wound. When I'm a spiritual warrior, the identity is so much bigger, and warriors are wounded. The wound becomes an honorable part of their wound that they can carry without breakdown, but they're living from their soul. So I'll tell another piece of John's story. We did Dream Incubation that year, and 4 people incubated. There was another Viet Nam veteran and 2 others. So they did the all-night incubation, and which is fasting and praying all day, and then the group prays over them, and we have a ritual putting them to bed. And we have a candle burning all night, and there's a support person there all night to pray, to give Reiki, to give energy healing, and to be there if they have any needs. So somebody was sitting by John's bedside all night long, and I was with him from like 2 in the morning till dawn. All night long, he was having severe combat nightmares. He'd wake up shaking and sweating, and his eyes were bulging, and the supporters would say, "Oh gosh, are you okay? Do you want to come out? Do you want to stop the incubation?" And John each time said, "No, I got to go back in. I've got to do this again. I don't know why. It's terrible, but there's more in me." So I'm sitting with him at dawn. The light breaks through the window, and he bolts upright, and his eyes, instead of rolling in terror, they're bright and they're clear, and his face is ecstatic. He's beaming, and he says, "It's over. I'm done. I'm clean." I said, "Oh, good morning, John. Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome to a new day. And what do you mean it's over and you're clean?" He said, "I don't know. It's just how I feel. The war is finally out of me. I emptied it." This was 13 years ago. I'm Scout's honor. He hasn't had a combat nightmare since then. He doesn't have the symptoms anymore. He is very sensitive. He lives in Maine where it's quieter, but he works in a VA, he volunteers in a VA hospital and now helps other veterans. He now also has been leading his own healing journeys back to Viet Nam.
Oh,
Place of his nightmares and his suffering.
unbelievable.
He's completely reconciled with the Vietnamese people. He's completely at peace. He, as an elder warrior, he serves other traumatized warriors and serves our country in the most beautiful ways. So, yes, it's really possible to fully heal and relieve the symptoms. It doesn't mean that we're not affected by them and the new identity. But John is very sensitive, and he has to protect himself. And he won't listen to the news for good reasons.
Yeah.
So he's protecting himself that way.
God.
But beyond that, no symptoms. And he, after 2 bad marriages that really suffered from being a veteran marriage, he finally fell in love with and married a woman who was on that Greek pilgrimage.
Oh my goodness.
So
Some of you have totally
love back from
Well, that story is just so powerful. It's like a fever broke, you know?
Yeah, well said. It's like the soul had a fever. Like we could call PTSD the soul's fever that finally can be broken with the right kind of holistic and spiritual practices.
I would think there's time went so fast. Not that we're finished, but I'm thinking, wait, there's 1,000 more things I want to ask you. That story incorporated a lot of travel, a lot of intense work, a lot of different tools that you use, involved you. It's like, how is that replicable in any kind of rational, doable way for somebody else? Because you had a phrase, and I held it in my head for a minute. I should have said written it down, but you said what happened to him is that the soul became bigger than the wound. I don't think you said it just like that. It feels very,
yes.
It feels like that's the whole answer, what you just said. The soul must be, and the soul is obviously already bigger than the wound. So it's not that the soul needs to grow.
No, it's that we can understand PTSD as post-traumatic soul distress. Okay? Or from the Lakota tradition, the spirits left. We can understand PTSD as soul wounding, soul loss during severe violent trauma. And the ancient traditions, not only the Greek, and the Native American and the Vietnamese and other ancient spiritual traditions teach, like Hippocrates said, that the soul wounding is the most severe, and we have to bring the soul back. And if we restore the soul, then the body, the mind, the heart, and our connection to community can all heal.
And how does one do that without having to go to Greece with you specifically? I mean, this is the key, right? Like, this is, you've made it happen. You've brought together everything as a healing source. Maybe, well, how can that be replicated in any kind of beneficial way? How can I do it?
Yeah, of course you can do it.
How can anyone do it? Yeah.
Well,
because I think we can.
I appreciate the honor and respect you're giving for me and my work. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I don't think of myself as better than anybody else or doing things other people can't do. I really don't. I've made it my life's work, and I've made much sacrifice to do this work, but don't need to be with me and don't need to do it my way, but rather whatever. We need a spiritual tradition. I would my core recipe for holistic healing is 3 words: spirituality in community. So really practice our whatever spiritual tradition we are most called to. Have a guide or facilitator you really trust to guide you through that tradition. Have a community to do it in, or find a community. You know, when I lead pilgrimage, we're 8 or 10 people on pilgrimage who become a healing community, and we immerse with the Greek people or Native American or the Vietnamese people. So we join their healing efforts, and we're in communion with them, and they participate in some of our rituals. But beyond that, you don't have to do any of that. A Jungian analyst, I know, an elder Jungian analyst said, well, the only dream incubation sanctuary anybody needs is their own pillow and their own bed at night. And that's
now we're
true.
talking.
Yeah. So for anybody, study the spiritual teachings that are most meaningful to you, and whatever they are, Greek or others. Meditate and pray with them. Do your hard work with them, one day at a time, like the 12-step programs say. And then set aside retreat time for yourself. And you can even do it alone. Declare a weekend as your dream healing retreat. Fast and pray and set your intentions. Prepare yourself and pray and think about your intentions and journal heavily and do artwork all weekend long or all day long. And then when night falls, create an altar, light a candle, write your intentions in your journal, or write your questions for God on a piece of paper and put them under your pillow. And go to sleep and just stay there and wait and fast and pray and watch your imagination and listen for as long as you need to until you get messages.
Wow, that was very helpful. I have 2 thoughts. We're living in an increasingly, I'll just say, soulless society. Many people who need healing are going to reject the idea of being spiritual, of a spiritual path. Can they be healed if they don't choose or don't believe or think that's all quackery or whatever? I mean, is it still possible to heal if you don't relate to that, to a spiritual world even, or to acknowledge that a spiritual world exists?
Sure. Well, several things to say in response. One is that, of course, I also work with atheists. And the military has many because the military creates atheists at what they've seen, right?
Yeah.
So one matter is that atheists are actually on an extremely difficult spiritual path. Because if you believe and affirm there's nothing there, then we're responsible for everything.
Yeah, that's very hard.
Right? Our actions,
Yeah.
our morality, what holds us all
Wow.
together comes from
Hadn't thought
human
of that.
sources. So, all right, you don't believe, I will work with you and accompany you on your arduous spiritual path to create an authentic life when you don't believe there's anything beyond us. So that's one matter. Don't reject. Let's not say somebody's not on a spiritual path because they don't believe in the trans person. They still are.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Secondly, it also really depends on a person's goals and how much healing they're seeking. Because lots of people just want symptom relief. And our
Right.
medical system thrives on that, of course.
Right. Of
We don't
course.
have we hardly have any doctors anymore. We have primaries, primary care physicians who are just traffic directors. You've got these symptoms. Well, you take these medications and you go to this specialist who only can talk to you about your skin or your heart or your toes, but they can't talk about anything else. So we've been broken into those many pieces. That's Aristotelian, and they don't even talk to each other or integrate it. So yeah, you can get rid of your symptoms through conventional medical practice, and it's miraculous. It can take the cancer out of your body. It can fix broken limbs. It can repair trauma. That's beautiful and miraculous and a gift. It's not the same as holistic healing that includes the heart and the soul. So it really depends how much healing a person wants.
Yeah.
Psychedelics and pharmaceuticals are becoming very, very popular for giving people altered states of consciousness experiences. The easy spiritual breakthrough by taking a drug to give it to you, which is good and can bring profound healing, but every methodology that I'm talking about in soul medicine, we can achieve without medications or drugs, including without the medicines.
And maybe even more importantly is that you don't want to just cure this thing that happened to you. You want to prevent anything more from happening. You need to, if you clear everything out, your chances of creating some crazy disease just to get your attention won't be necessary anymore, right?
Exactly. In your words, our diseases are trying to get our attention. Our symptoms are the way our soul talks to us when we haven't heard it. And when we don't know what's wrong with what's afflicting us, the symptoms are asking to be translated into our psychospiritual conditions, not just asking to be suppressed with a medication so they come out in another way, as you just rightly pointed out.
I think your own experience speaks so clearly to this. Do you mind sharing that just as to whatever level you want? Because you're with your wife. That was just a beautiful story. Beautiful story. And very demonstrative. I mean, look at you.
Yeah, look at me. Okay, so to our friends out there.
You're the picture of health. Yeah, I mean, seriously, you are. Okay. You look very healthy.
I'm happy to share this. I'm 72, and I'm much, much healthier than I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I do have pretty advanced spinal stenosis and other physical challenges and injuries. I was in a wheelchair 6 years ago.
Oh, that's amazing.
And for all of our friends out there, look at me.
Wow. And now he's dancing.
Oh, yeah. And very much conventional medicine offered me two things, of course. Cortisone shots in the spine. I had 3 and they didn't do anything. And then, there's nothing else to do but surgery. And back surgery has a 50% chance of helping you and 50% chance of making you worse. And I said, no more cortisone and no surgery. Absolutely not. I'm going to seek holistic healing. And I have been doing that. And I've had extreme success with this, especially through the Greek tradition. Through doing dream incubations myself that revealed what my psychological and spiritual contributions to my back collapse are. In my book, I talk about a conference called a concept, the biomythic narrative. What gods and goddesses are working in your body, in your disease, and what are they trying to say to you? So I had to encounter the myths that I was living that were crushing me that I needed to work on and to change.
Mm.
And so I've done that. Also, I worked with holistic healers in Greece. So in Greece, I do the fire walking ceremony, which has helped restore some of my nervous system functioning in my legs that went numb and didn't work anymore. I work with a massage therapist in Greece who has studied the way Hippocrates used to do massages in the ancient world. And they really are the best massages I've ever had in my life. And I stayed on the island where she works now, and I work there too. But in a month of staying on that island and doing that massage work with her, and also doing incubations, I went from when I arrived on the island, I was on 2 canes, on walkers.
Not sure.
And when I left, I was dancing, and I threw my canes away.
Really?
Yeah. Really.
You know, I have to ask you why you started with cortisone, and I'm asking this because I think it's really pertinent to anyone listening who.
Unless there's something else I can help with.
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to stop some noises from happening. You didn't start with that. You didn't start with holistic, even though this is or did you? Because this is your entire life's work. And yet when it happened to you, did you start with traditional and then because you wanted symptom relief, but then you went for deeper healing?
Honestly, I was in so much crippling pain that I couldn't walk.
Oh, so you needed to
I live in an old farmhouse, the bedrooms are upstairs, and I couldn't climb the stairs.
Oh my goodness.
Move. So I was.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need symptom relief in order to pursue our further healing.
Got it.
To be able to walk so I can get to Greece. So I
got it. No, I understand.
Go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Excuse me.
No, that's helpful to know. That's really pragmatic, and that's why I wanted to ask that question because of course you believe this, but you went for this, and that makes perfect sense. Just so people don't think that this is really alternate or I mean I don't want to say it's not mainstream, but you work with the U.S. with the military, with the U.S. military, correct?
Yes.
So, and maybe you could talk about a little bit more what you're doing right now. You mentioned Ukraine and Russia, the Middle East. There's a lot of very legit work that you're doing.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for presenting or helping me present my new book, Soul Medicine, today. Thank you. I have an earlier book called The Practice of Dream Healing, which is also the Asclepian tradition and its entire history, and also how I replicated in Greece. So I've got those 2 books on the Greek tradition. Also in my work specializing with military and veterans, I have 2 books that really were breakthrough. One is called War and the Soul, and the next one is called Warrior's Return. So War and the Soul is, they're both about PTSD being essentially a soul wound and a social disorder.
Yeah.
And how traditional cultures around the world, not only Greece, have understood it and interpreted and healed it. And an entire model for holistic healing of our violent traumatic wounds that I developed over these 40 years of working with these traditions and using them with veterans. Those books, Warrior's Return, the more recent one, is presently being translated into both Russian and Ukrainian. And I'm working by Zoom with both countries, with their military trauma healers to try to reduce and prevent trauma and moral injury as much as possible while the war is going on. I'm also still working with our military. I was a subject matter expert on PTSD and moral injury for a decade, chosen by the Pentagon. And this is interesting too. I trained thousands of chaplains from many of the different branches. Very few psychologists and behavioral health people would come to the trainings. Wow. The chaplains came because it's spiritually based. and the other professions wouldn't come unless the
So
individual
interesting.
had a spiritual orientation, because
Right.
those disciplines teach people to avoid the spiritual, send them to their ministers and chaplains. We don't deal with that. Rather than, of
Yeah.
course, we deal with it. It's in the center of our being.
Right.
So, and presently, I'm also working with a deployed division in the Middle East, supervising the chief chaplain and all of their chaplains while they're on deployment, and how to work with their troops, again, to reduce the trauma and moral injury while they're being deployed. So I'm still very active with
Very
world
active.
militaries in this way, and I continue to work with the Vietnamese. And I had to stop those pilgrimages to Vietnam, of course, because of COVID, but I'm starting them again.
Oh.
And it would be another long discussion, but there isn't wartime PTSD in Vietnam the way there is here. It's not there.
Well, I wanted to touch on that because it is a whole nother discussion, but maybe even just to get the message from that, because I found that so powerful. You said that in Vietnam, where they lost so many more millions of people and lost their country essentially, and they're not suffering from it, and we're still suffering from it in this
Yes.
country. And it's about the community, it's about the society, right? If you had to,
spirituality in community, it's really about both. It really is.
is it?
It
Okay.
really is. All right. So there's so many aspects about Vietnam and why it doesn't. And I'm hoping my next book will be about that, actually.
That would be,
But
yeah.
very, very, very briefly. All right. Buddhism, Confucianism, ancestor worship, a communal culture, only defending our country, not invading another.
Oh,
Okay.
that could be huge.
Yes. And we have been invaded by larger, more powerful nations for over 2,000 years. Continually, we know how to deal with this, and we've had to deal with this. We have a history of dealing with these invasions, of not
Vietnam
invading
does.
others. Yeah.
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 And we have, for 2,000 years, our people have been gathering in the pagodas and talking about it and listening to each other's stories and supporting
There
each
you go.
other.
Just
They're
that.
never alone.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
alone. It's never. And in our Western healing system, we make the wound an individual pathology rather than a communal wound we all carry.
Yeah.
Oh, something's wrong with you because you can't get it together. And you've been home for 40 years and you're still suffering. You've got a pathology. No, no, no. We haven't brought you home. We haven't taken the war out of you. We haven't treated you correctly. We haven't helped you heal
That got
yourself.
me. That's huge. That really affected me a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will say that I did try to read War in the Soul, and what I had to do, and I just think, depending on the person reading it, you may or may not be able to read it all, because I read parts and then I started with that, and I kind of had to stop because I did find it difficult for me to take that, into my heart. Which is, I wondered how you've been able to do that, because obviously you're a very gentle soul, you're a poet, you feel these things so deeply, and you've taken it on for so many years, and I don't think I could do that. I don't think that I could make that boundary, but thank God that you have. I just want to say that what I had to do to read that, because there are so many important messages in that book and teachings, but I had to listen to that because I was listening to some of them on tape, and then I would listen to soul healing. Like, I would get soul healing from that, and then I would go back, and then I had a much higher ability to hear it. I don't know what that was, but it's a lot altogether, but broken up, because the messages are important. Break it up with soul. Go back for a little dose of soul healing, and then go back and take it in.
Sure, that's a wonderful practice, and thank you for discovering that for yourself. I really, War in the Soul is not bedtime reading.
No.
Don't read it before sleep. You don't want those images in you before you go into the dream world. And yes, and read it slowly and carefully. And maybe, depending on, sometimes out loud, sometimes read it with others. There have been especially among veterans in the military, they have study groups where, let's read one chapter a week and explore how it applies to us and
I
not
like that.
overload ourselves, because it is so intense. So good for you taking care of yourself as you read it, and also knowing your boundaries. Regarding how I get myself through this work, long ago, I did evolve a mantra for myself, which is walk through hell with my heart wide open. So that's what I've been doing with our survivors, and still do.
That takes a lot of courage.
Thank you. And let me also share, because we will be exposed, we will absorb some of the toxins of trauma. So I've also had to heal myself of what we would call secondary PTSD, as well as my physical wounding. So I did have combat nightmares for about 2 years, and that was a long time ago. And I knew it was part of my initiation into the world of warriors so that I could tolerate the imagery without being further traumatized myself. And those 2 years of nightmares really also led me to a revisiting of my own values as a peace activist, and to readjust some of the values and some of my understanding of the place of violence in the human psyche.
How many hours can we talk? we do need to wrap it up, but honestly, there's just so much there, and I will turn to your books for more insights and more knowledge. You said that when you saw Women of Troy, it changed your life from that point on.
Yes.
I think my reading Soul Medicine is changing, and speaking will change my life from this point on. I felt a very tangible shift in my psyche. I don't know what it is yet. It's still new. I'm excited though.
It doesn't have to be formally, but even informally, could we check in a month or so and explore?
Would love to do that.
If it's happening in you, this is wonderful responsiveness and feedback for me. I'm so glad. Oh, so glad to meet you and share this way. But I celebrate that you received so much from sharing our work. That's great.
I did, and we should thank Diane Morris, who brought us now Southern, who brought us together in this. As someone we have both worked with in the past, so I just want to not forget to thank her for her bringing us together. And I will definitely check in with you, and reveal whatever has been revealed to me. So, Edward, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I will put all the in the show notes, all the links to your books, your poetry, to your website, and people can follow you as they see fit. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and thank you. And bless you. You're doing beautiful work with all of the people you bring to help us all have guidance for how to heal and
we need guidance.
Our wounded world. So bless you.
We learn from each other. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we need each other. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.